All right. U.S.-China Business Council last week released its report on U.S. exports to China by state. The data that we have is unsurprising. Obviously, there was a significant drop in U.S. exports to China throughout 2018 due to the battles that the two governments had over trade policies. That's most likely seen, however, in the goods data rather than on the services side. What we can see through the data is that while services grew modestly, around 4.7%, a little bit slower than we had seen in previous years, there was a dramatic drop in exports of goods. That likely is because of the tariffs that were imposed on almost 85% of U.S. exports to China in response to the U.S. tariffs that the U.S. imposed on Chinese imports. What we can see for individual states is the clear tracking of where those tariffs hit the exports for individual states. States with a significant amount of exposure on agriculture, particularly throughout the Midwest, saw the much larger decreases in exports than states who didn't have a similar exposure. And states who exported chemicals, aircraft, those kinds of areas also had problems. On the services side, I think the interesting thing to keep in mind first is that we don't know exactly what the data is showing us. The data lags by about a year at the state level, so while we know that the data through the end of 2017 showed a slowing, the best that we can assume at this point is that that was in anticipation and in recognition of growing tensions between the United States and China. The largest areas of service exports for the United States right now to China are actually the kinds of things that people sometimes aren't aware are exports. So for instance, travel and tourism and actually students. Education is considered an export when the student is a national of a different country. We do think that we probably will continue to see some declines on those areas. Tensions definitely throughout 2018 increased rather than decreased, and U.S. policies on visa may have had an effect on that as well. But there might actually be some interesting upsides on the services data if the United States and China are able to come to an agreement on the broader trade issues. Among the other types of services that the United States exports are royalties, licensing fees, industrial processes, all different types of intellectual property that, should the U.S. and China come to an agreement on how to deal with these issues, might see increases as American companies are willing to sell and license more of their technology into China. Overall, the data shows that the two economies remain very tightly intertwined and that the fortunes can improve or decline based on the broader relationship, even at the state and local level where those things are felt more acutely. We plan to issue a report probably later this summer that will take this data down to the congressional district level. So we'll have a little more of a local angle on how areas around the country fared, and we anticipate probably very similar results, although probably a little more tied to the municipalities where those companies are based.